There's a generation hiding in plain sight. Not the ones who reinvented the world with optimism. Not the ones who were handed trophies just for showing up. The ones in between. The ones who learned, early and without ceremony, that the world wasn't going to pause and wait for them. They were born between 1965 and 1980. And if you're looking for them, you'll find them in the back of the meeting room. The ones who already solved the problem before the meeting started. The ones who don't post about it. Generation X. In the summer of 1976, a child in an American suburb could disappear into the woods after breakfast and not resurface until the streetlights came on. Nobody panicked. Nobody tracked them. The absence of a parent wasn't a crisis. It was just Tuesday. What that freedom created, quietly and without anyone naming it, was a generation that understood consequence through direct experience, not through warnings, not through protective software, through scraped knees and burned grilled cheese and the sinking feeling of locking yourself out of the house on a cold afternoon. By the early 1980s, dual-income households had become the norm rather than the exception. The economy demanded it, and so an entire cohort of American children became fluent in solitude before they were fluent in algebra. Developmental psychologists have noted that this kind of early autonomy doesn't simply produce independence. It produces a particular cognitive wiring, a brain trained from childhood to run its own simulations, to think, if I do this, then that. Not because someone taught them to, because no one was there to intercept the lesson. This generation watched the adult world make promises it didn't keep. Their parents believed in institutions, in the company that would provide, in the marriage that would hold, in the government that was honest about what it knew. And then, in real time, Gen X watched those institutions crack. Watergate taught them that authority lies. The divorce rate climbing through the 70s and 80s taught them that permanence is an illusion. The AIDS crisis, fumbled and minimized by the people in charge, taught them that incompetence in high places has a body count. What do you do with that information when you're 12 years old? You file it away. You build a kind of interior architecture that looks like cynicism from the outside, but functions on the inside as protection. Psychologists sometimes call this defensive pessimism. Gen X calls it knowing how this goes. They became fluent in irony the way some people become fluent in a second language. Not because they're detached, because distance for them is a survival mechanism. When you grew up under the shadow of nuclear annihilation, when duck and cover drills were a normal part of the school day, when the adults around you simultaneously warned of catastrophe and told you not to worry, you learned to hold contradiction without breaking. You learned to joke about the unthinkable because the alternative was paralysis. That same emotional architecture shapes how they work. There's no generation that talks less about its own work ethic while demonstrating more of it. Gen X didn't grow up with career coaches or personal branding. They grew up with paper routes and dishwashing jobs and babysitting gigs that paid in cash and left no paper trail. By the time they were teenagers, many of them had already experienced what it meant to be accountable to someone other than a parent. The customer waiting for their order. The neighbor who needed their driveway shoveled before 6 in the morning. They watched the generation before them spend decades building loyalty to companies that liquidated that loyalty without hesitation. So they made a different calculation. Not loyalty to the institution, loyalty to the craft. You can take the job away. You cannot take away what they know how to do. This is where something interesting lives in the psychology of Generation X. They are, in clinical terms, highly competent and deeply reluctant to admit they need anything. Research consistently shows they are less likely than other generations to seek social support during periods of stress. Not because the support isn't available, but because asking for it triggers something deep. A voice that says, "Figure it out. You've always figured it out. You were 8 years old and you figured it out." That voice kept them functional through genuinely difficult circumstances. The dot-com collapse, the 2008 financial crisis, two major economic catastrophes timed with remarkable precision to hit them at the worst possible moments in their financial lives. Not at the edges of a career, but at its center. They responded the way they always have. They diversified. They adapted. They didn't blog about it. Before the internet made information ambient, information required a kind of pilgrimage. You went to the library. You navigated the card catalog. You waited for the book to be available. You read it sitting under fluorescent lights in a room that smelled like old paper. That process, slow and effortful, did something to the knowledge. It landed differently. Cognitive researchers describe this as effortful encoding. The harder you work to learn something, the more completely it belongs to you. Gen X can fix things with their hands because fixing things with your hands was what you did. When the bicycle chain slipped, you flipped the bike and worked it back yourself. When the television lost its signal, you adjusted the antenna, experimented, got it working. There was no number to call. There was no tutorial. There was just the problem and the tools available and the assumption that you were the person responsible for solving it. Now many of them are parents, and they've parented differently than they were parented. They showed up. They paid attention. They drove to the games and attended the recitals and asked genuinely how their children were feeling. They gave their kids everything they didn't have. And sometimes, late at night, they wonder if they've also taken something away. Some friction, some useful difficulty, some early lesson in the reliability of being alone and coming through it anyway. Because in the Gen X understanding of the world, visibility is not safety. Visibility is exposure. The instinct to keep something back, to not broadcast, to maintain a private interior. That isn't technophobia. It isn't discomfort with modernity. It's a worldview formed in a time when what you didn't share couldn't be used against you. There's something worth pausing on here. This generation entered the world when one era was ending and stayed to build the next one. They coded the architecture of the internet they now barely use publicly. They designed systems they let younger generations take credit for. They occupied the awkward middle position in every institution they ever entered, too young to have earned the old rules, too old to benefit from the new ones. Bridges don't announce themselves. They don't ask for recognition. They absorb the weight of everything passing over them, and they hold. That might be the most precise description of Generation X that exists. Not a soundbite, not a trend piece, just the quiet, load-bearing work of a generation that learned young that nobody was coming to check on them. And decided that was fine, that they could handle it. They were right.